Hey everyone, I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, which is our 20th episode, we're going to look back at some of the stories that have lightened our lives and the lives of our listeners. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey Alicia.
Hi, Scott. It's so weird not having a guest on, right?
I know. Yeah. I guess we're each other's guests today.
We are.
But
It's good company. Good company.
Yeah, definitely. We still like each other after 20 episodes, so that's pretty cool.
I know. What do you think? Jeez.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun.
It is. We're totally winging it, guys. We don't have anything super scripted. We decided we were just going to jump on here. We were going to recap some of the amazing stories that we've had over these last 20 episodes. We're going to share some of the things that stood out to us, what we've learned. Just kind of share, I guess, in the memory. So we hope that you guys enjoy. If you have not had an opportunity to listen to all 20 episodes, don't worry, we're not going to spoil them too much. There's definitely still a lot of really good stuff to listen to in each of the episodes. So with that, let's see. I'm going to start off.
Yeah. Go ahead. So what we're going to do is Alicia's going to take an episode and kind of talk about what really stood out to her, some of the things that touched her heart, or that really made a difference to her in her life. And then I'll do the next one. We'll kind of go back and forth for all 20 episodes. So yeah, I think it should be fun.
Yeah. Well, Scott, you actually get to start because the first real guest was moi.
Right.
And so you get to kind of start by recapping my episode.
Awesome. So, yeah, I mean, you think you know somebody, right? And then you hear these stories that you didn't know. I mean, Alicia and I had known each other for several years before we started doing this. And when she told her story, it felt like she was a different person. Like a lot of the things that she talked about happened before I ever met her. And I remember one of the stories you talked about was when you were, saying your prayers one night and you heard this voice, mommy, right? A little child saying mommy to you, and you looked around and you saw a child in the doorway that wasn't your child, right?
Yep, I did.
So yeah, and that happened twice, right?
So technically it was twice. So I only saw one time, right. But I heard mommy a couple different times. And then I just had this confirmation from Nate. I don't know if you remember that part of the story. Nate was
that's right,
about 3 or 4 years old. And he kind of confirmed, again, I'm not going to spoil everything. You guys got to go back and listen to some of this. But Nate had kind of confirmed that I was not crazy. Right. There really was a little kiddo that was calling out to me. So, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I remember just thinking how amazing that was, that not only did that happen, but there were other things that happened with your husband, being, a soldier and coming back with PTSD and not wanting to have any more kids, and, that battle and that tiny window that you had to have another kid even, right? And everything came together. So it was really cool. I also remember in your story how after you had Lulu, or Laura, I guess you call her Laura now, right?
Both.
How you got leukemia.
I did.
I mean, that's and then that whole battle. It's incredible.
Yeah, that was a very rough 7 years. Very rough 7 years. So I'm very glad. Currently, I'm in remission. The last time I got my blood work done, still good to go, So we're just moving along.
Right. I love that that didn't stop you though, because when you and I first met, you had it. You were kind of in the
Hmm.
middle of it, right?
I was, yeah. Yep. I was
But you,
learning how to manage as best as I could, but it still affected me. So,
right. But you didn't let that stop you. I mean, you were a force of nature back then, even when I met
no.
you.
Well, thanks.
So, and you still
Oh,
are. So that's good.
well, thank you.
Um, yeah. And then the
Yeah,
last
I
thing that,
figured. Oh, sorry. I
go
figured
ahead.
mopey Alicia was not very fun, so I might as well be, busy Alicia that laughs a lot and if you're going to have pain and you're not going to feel good, you might as well at least have fun with it as much as you can, right? So,
Yeah,
that
but
was
you
kind of
didn't
my
even,
motto.
I mean, you didn't really even show that publicly. I'm sure
Oh,
you,
well,
I'm sure that
that's good.
that was, privately, you probably were in a lot of pain and
Mhm.
probably
Yeah.
depressed. I mean, that must be depressing to know that you were dealing with cancer,
Yeah, it
right? I mean,
was it was pretty hard. It was always in the back of my mind. It still is. It's still there. Like there's times where I'm constantly like, what if I don't stay in remission? What if it comes back?
hmm
But I kind of fill my life up with a bunch of good things so that hopefully the good can outweigh the worry.
yeah,
And it
well,
seems to help.
yeah, I mean, you're a very positive person by nature, so
Thanks,
I'm sure
Scott.
that does make a difference.
Thanks.
The last thing I remember in your story is that when your mom found out that you had leukemia, that she had drank for a long time, right? Like
Hmm.
several
Uh,
years.
Practically my entire life that I
Okay,
remember. There
wow.
was a time when I was younger where she didn't drink that I know of, but pretty much from when I could remember, she was drinking. Um, so yeah, it'd been a while.
And
Been
then that day,
the
right?
almost.
That day you told her
Mm-hmm. Yep,
she stopped drinking, right?
she did. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep, she did. It was definitely really neat. And the funny thing is she didn't even tell me until like years later. Isn't that crazy? I literally
hmm
didn't know. And she just didn't tell me until years later. I don't know if she was kind of afraid to like jinx it or to disappoint me if she fell off the wagon or whatever, but she hasn't had a drop since. And like I said, that I had leukemia for 7 years and I've been in remission for 2.5. So we're going on 9.5, almost 10 years now, since my mom's had a drink. And she is a different person today. She's definitely incorporated the gospel very much in her life. She's gone through and gotten her endowments in the temple.
hmm
Um, we were sealed together, which I guess actually kind of brings me into the next episode, which was my husband, John.
Right. Yeah.
John shared his story, and during this whole leukemia thing and whatever, he had gone through a lot of stuff himself. Um, and we actually got to the point after 13 very, very rough years of marriage, we were going to get divorced. And, at that time, I felt almost like relieved, like I was like, thank goodness I don't have to deal with this anymore. I know that I'm going to have to deal with some other problems now because with divorce, it doesn't really take away the problems. It just transfers them into a different bucket, right?
Especially when you have kids, right?
Especially with kids. Yep, exactly. And I really loved when John was sharing his story. He talked a lot about just kind of what he was going through. It gave me a different perspective. I don't know if it was, maybe it's because as a host, I couldn't just look at him as my husband. I had to look at him as my guest.
hmm
And with every guest that we have on, one of the things that I try really hard to do is I try to put myself in a position where I can empathize with them and where I don't have any type of uh, biased against them or anything like that. I really try to find the similarities. And that was one of the things that I tried doing with John when he was sharing his story. So it gave me a whole new perspective that like you said, I've known this guy, I've been married to him for 13 years. But when he got on and he shared his story, he opened up about some things that I hadn't really heard about before. So it was really interesting. he talked about how uh, the day after we decided to get divorced, he got up and he heard a voice that was reprimanding him. That was just like, "What are you doing?"
Right. Yep. That's
And
right.
it shook him. It really did. It shook him to his core, and he confided in my brother a bunch. Um, and it was a lot of the things that my brother shared with him, things that my brother told him, that kind of got him to decide for himself by looking into the church if the church was really true. That was one of the things that we had butted heads on, was him not being a member of the church and us not agreeing religiously on things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was really neat. Of course, uh, shortly after he got baptized, we had some tragedy in our family, and that kind of threw us in this whole other realm of problems and feelings and what do we do. But even out of these tragedies, we ended up at the temple. I got sealed with my brother and my parents a week before I got sealed to my husband and my kids. So
Yeah.
it was pretty
That was a
powerful.
cool experience. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
One thing
Yeah.
that you just reminded me of, and I think it's important to mention, is I talked to John several times, right?
Mhm.
When he wasn't a member, and I gave him books. I really tried
Yeah.
to get him to think about what he was missing, and
Mhm.
I I I, I don't feel like I got through, but Zach got through, right? So you
Zach
never
did, but
know.
yeah, but don't discredit yourself, because there were a couple very key people whose friendship meant so much to John and set such a good example of the church. And you were one of those people. Bob Miller, he was another one. John loved
Hmm.
Bob, who just really kind of just loved him where he was at. And I think that if he didn't feel that Christ-like love from people like you and people like Bob, I don't know if he would have really even wanted to take Zach's advice as easily. So don't discredit yourself.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad you said that,
Yeah.
because what I was thinking was, maybe there are certain people that just make the difference, but you're right. It probably is a group of people
Yeah.
in most
Yeah.
cases, right? So
I
yeah,
definitely
that's a
think
good point.
so. I know it's rough, because there were some well-meaning members in the past who, they just kind of didn't go about friendship the right way with John, and it really that was kind of part of the problem. Was he was like, "Well, if people in the church act like that, I don't want to be a part of your church." You know what I mean? And I'm like,
Right.
but like, they were trying to be nice. They just had no tact, like they just didn't
Yeah.
understand what they were saying or what they were doing. So it definitely meant a lot to our family that you were and continue to be like such a good person, just in general. Just you and your whole family. I love your whole family. You
Awesome.
guys
You
are
can
great.
pay me later.
Okay. I think you need to pay me. I was giving you the compliment right now.
That's true. I guess you're
Oh.
right. Dang it. All right. So
Mm.
that moves us to our next guest, which was Cameron
Oh,
Daley.
love Cameron Daley. We have to have him on again. I know he's got more stories.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. So when Alicia and I were in the same ward, I was the bishop, and we combined wards with another ward in our stake, and Cameron came with that new ward,
Yes, he did.
and him and his wife got up to speak in sacrament meeting one Sunday, and Cameron tells this incredible story about how him and his wife met. Oh my gosh, I have never laughed so hard in
Oh,
sacrament
I know.
meeting. I was
Mhm.
crying. I
Oh,
had
me too.
tears like streaming down my face sitting on the
Yes.
stand. And as
Yep.
he was telling his story, where, like, you could just tell, like,
Where it was
what he was
going.
gonna say. Yeah, like right at the end. And I visibly, like, or not visibly, I audibly said, oh no,
Oh
like
no.
out loud on the stand before he threw the punchline. I didn't know this story,
Yeah.
but I knew what he was gonna say.
Oh
And
yeah.
oh man, it was so funny. So
It
we knew we had to get him on the show to tell
mhm.
his story.
It is hands down the funniest story that I think I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, to this day, just thinking about it cracks me up, and I'll be smiling so much that my cheeks hurt from it. It's and Cameron's just got this amazing personality, right? Like, he's just one of those people that you could listen to him read a grocery list and he would make it entertaining. You know what I mean? He's he's just
Yeah.
such a cool guy. He was an amazing guest to have on, and uh, yeah, we've joked about making him our honorary co-host, our honorary guest co-host. So
Yeah, we'll definitely have him back. We're not gonna
for sure.
spoil the punchline, but
No, we're not. You
if
just
you
go listen to it.
look at the title of the podcast, that might give you a little bit of a hint. So
Yeah, very cool. Well, and then we had another amazing person, Roz Hester. I love Roz. She is like the most fashionable, high energy woman that I've ever met. She has this New York attitude, but she has the biggest heart in the world. And her
mhm.
story, I just remember being like, oh my, it's just full of miracles and humor and oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that and I can't believe that happened. And man, she was just let's just preface, she was a party girl in New York who saw a commercial for a free Bible, right? And
Right.
that just snowballed into this incredible story. And she ends up being this mom, and she's out in Utah now, and she loves the gospel as much as she loves fashion, and she is just a fireball. I loved listening to Roz. I could have listened to her for another hour. Honestly, I mean,
Yeah.
it was so good, and I love when she's loud and fiery, but as soon as she starts talking about spiritual matters, there is this shift, you know, where
Mhm.
she gets a little calm for a minute and you can just feel her testimony. And that was such a good episode. I love that one. It was
She
amazing.
also has a contagious laugh. You can't
She
help but laugh
does.
when she laughs, right?
Yeah. And the biggest, brightest, whitest smile that I've ever seen. Like, it is just I mean, she should just be on like a dentist commercial because she's just got this glorious smile.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Roz is amazing. I loved her. I loved her episode.
One of the
Yeah.
things that I love about her, um, and I think she kind of talked about it in her thing, was where she talked about how she felt the prompting to pay her tithe when she didn't
Mm,
have
yes.
anything.
No,
She has,
literally. Would she have a mattress on the floor or
yeah,
something? It was,
like
I mean, barely anything at all, like a chair and a mattress, and it was her and her kids. And yeah, just the miracles that came from her paying her tithing and that faithfulness. And you know what I loved too about that part is I remember uh the bishop, whoever her bishop was at the time, he didn't really come across as like super giving. You know what I
mhm.
mean? Like, he kind of was like, oh, like, like a lot of people come and ask for help, and we're not gonna I can't do it right now, or something like that. And she didn't let that deter her. She was like, that's okay. Like, I'm gonna pay my tithing anyway because that's what she was prompted to do. And she really saw a bunch of miracles fall into her lap after doing that. And that was awesome. That was really
And
cool.
she still, I mean, I truly feel like if there's anyone in this world that lives on miracles, it's probably Roz.
It is
She can,
Roz.
even to this day, she has faith that things are just going to keep working out every day, and she really
Oh
lives
yeah.
like paycheck to paycheck,
Mhm.
just on that edge constantly. But she just has faith that a miracle will
Yeah.
happen, and it just, and she is so grateful for every day, every every
Mhm.
gift that she receives. It's just incredible. We'll have to have
And
her on again too.
we do. Yeah. Yeah. She's such a giver. Like, she's not stingy, you know? She's just like, "Oh,
Hmm.
I'm going to help. I'm going to be there. I'm going to do what I can do." And for such a tiny person, she has a very big spirit. I
Hmm.
don't know how the spirit fits
Definitely.
all in her, but it, you know. It's awesome. Love Roz.
Yeah, me
You know,
too.
speaking of giving, our next
Right,
episode.
Emily. Yeah, Emily
Mhm.
Hemmert. That was probably as far as podcasts go that we've done so far, that one was the most like emotionally rewarding for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just hit my heart. Um just her story of how, she went on this mission. Well, she was a convert, right?
Mhm.
She went
Yep.
on a mission to Honduras, which is a third world country,
Yeah.
and uh, just had this really difficult time. But she just met
Yeah.
this one companion that was from Honduras that just made it worth it. And
Mhm.
then she was able to years later help her and help this companion and her family in incredible ways. It basically saved their lives.
Yeah.
Um, I it was like heartbreaking to me that they wanted to do what was right, but they were so poor that the husband was going to basically go across the border illegally to the US
Yeah. He
because
was so desperate for help.
His family was
Mhm.
starving, right?
Yeah.
And just to have that dilemma where I, and I try to put myself in his place and think, what would I do if my family was starving?
Yeah.
That's a really hard place to be in.
For
And
sure.
so the fact that Emily and her husband could help her missionary companion and her husband years
Mhm.
later is incredible. And she does that through a nonprofit that she started this
Mhm.
year.
Yep.
It's
And
so
I got to
cool.
say, I'm going to put a little shout out here because I just was called as the stake self-reliance specialist. The whole idea for the organization was kind of propelled because Emily and her husband took the starting and growing a business self-reliance class. And
Hmm.
through that program, they were really inspired to be like, okay, this is how we can do this. Um, and it was a big tool in getting this nonprofit going and stuff for them, which was just incredible because they're doing amazing things from halfway across the world for these people who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to do things like kids going to school, people getting microloans for businesses. They're just Anthony and Emily are some of the best people that you'll meet in life. They just genuinely love to help other people, and they're just so happy and just so thankful for life. And part of their story had some tragedy too when they talked about their son and the
Oh, that's
difficulties
right.
that they went through with his health issues and everything. So they definitely know what it's like to be in difficult positions and to need help and then to turn around and be able to give help to others once they got themselves into a position where they were more self-reliant themselves. And yeah, definitely. That it was a feel good episode, wasn't it? What's
Totally.
funny is there were quite a few listeners after that episode who reached out and helped to donate to the nonprofit. So that to me was amazing because we were just brand new. She was like our what fifth episode or something like that.
Hmm.
And we didn't have a lot of people watching or listening, but the impact that she had in sharing her story through our show opened up to where her husband was invited on another podcast. I don't know if you knew this,
No, I
to
didn't.
share the
That's
same thing.
cool.
Yep. He was invited on another podcast and that kind of helped propel their organization. So just good, just feel good all around, do good, left you smiling. That was a really good episode. It was really good.
Well,
We're
and
going to have to
I
have
just
her
found
on sometime and have
oh
like an
yeah,
update,
like a
you
follow
know?
up. Yeah, yeah. I just
Yeah.
found out that they've helped over 50 kids so far.
Wow.
Isn't that
That's
amazing?
amazing. Oh,
Just
that's so
within the
cool.
last few months. And then
Wow.
I know they've done several microloans to help, st- little businesses to help families and things already. It's
Mhm.
just that, starting to take off and make a
Yeah.
difference. I mean, 50 kids.
That's
50 kids
amazing.
can go to school now that couldn't go to school before, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
120
definitely.
bucks, I mean, you give a kid a whole year of education. Like, it's just such a cool thing.
It
So
it really is.
if anybody wants to go and make a difference in a little kid's life, go to the markoviaproject.org. That's
Mhm.
Emily's nonprofit, and sponsor one of her kids. Let's get
Yeah,
these kids in school.
definitely.
Cool.
Oh, well, another person, our next guest that we had on, who, she kind of had a hand in in this whole podcast starting, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
she was in there, right? Was our book coach, our book editor and book coach, Kim Clement. Um, Such a sweet person. I mean, she's just got this calm about her where, she's got this beautiful smile and she just calms you down and she loves helping people, especially when it comes um to the passion that she has with books, help with writing and stuff. And
Right.
we had her on. She kind of talked a little bit about sort of the struggles that she had earlier in her childhood and how her mom decided to homeschool her. And that's where she started loving learning. And then years later, she grew up, became an adult, and that kind of got put on the back burner. The reading and the books, it kind of got put on the back burner a little bit. And then she got really sick from overdoing it. This episode totally went down a different path than I thought that it was going to go down. you know,
Oh.
like I remember she said something along the lines of how we're always told like to give our all to the Lord. And she had this epiphany because she had done so much that it caused her to have this disease called adrenal fatigue. And she said, what I realized was that like what my all is not giving so much that I implode. And
Mm.
I was like, okay, like, I hear ya. You know, I love being busy. I love overscheduling things. Not that I love it, but I just do it. I'm like a yes person. And that
Yeah.
really helped me just to kind of calm down. I took some things off my plate after that episode. And I felt like I could sort of like clear my head a little. So she's like a Yoda. That's what I she's like our little book Yoda. She
Yeah.
just helps us along the way. But uh I told you about her and
Mm-hmm.
you started talking to her and she just give you a whole bunch of information without even being her client in
Oh,
the
yeah.
beginning? Is that
Yeah.
correct?
A lot. I felt kind of
Mhm.
guilty actually because she helped me out so much and I didn't pay her anything.
Yep.
But and she also helped me to set up the pitching for my book
Mhm.
at the LDS
PMA.
PMA. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that was really cool. She did that all for free. And
Yeah.
that really helped me because then I got in front of, all the major publishers and I was able to build some relationships there.
Yep.
And because I went to that conference, that's why this podcast exists because I met somebody at the conference that had a podcast
Yep.
and that gave me the idea for this podcast. And then I called Alicia and told her she needed to hang out with me every week and
Yeah.
do this. So it's been awesome. So thanks, Kim.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, oh,
Cool.
who did we have
So
next?
so we had Caden Laga,
Yes.
which
Oh,
was an incredible story. He went
crazy.
hunting
Yeah.
with his dad in in a wilderness, and it's actually the largest wilderness in the United States. It's in Montana, I believe. Was
Yeah,
it
the
Montana? Yeah,
bitter root.
Bitterroot. Yeah.
I think it's
So he said it
Montana.
was
Yeah.
1.3 million acres
Yeah.
of just mountainous wilderness. There's nothing there, no humans in there, and you can just
Mhm.
go in and backpack and things like that. He got lost and
Yeah.
thought he was going to die.
And when
And
we say lost, we don't mean he meandered off the trail a little bit and then was like found in it. He was 5 days with a granola bar and a bottle of water, and that's it. in
Mm-hmm.
the wilderness in Montana, and it was like cold and raining, and by all logic, he should not have survived. He shouldn't have. Like when you just, there's just, he shouldn't have survived. Um, I loved Caden's story. Like he has shared his story a few different times at firesides and stuff, and so he's had time. This is what I loved. He took some time after the event to just sit with his experience. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
go out and share right away. He really reflected and thought about the things that had happened and what it meant to him. And then when he was ready to share, he had a really good understanding of how his testimony changed and grew. And he said that something along the lines of how um he's not so much afraid to die anymore, right? But man, does
Mm-hmm.
he love living. And he proves that to Heavenly Father in everything that he does. Like he wants to be with his family, he wants to, go out and accomplish things, and he doesn't want to live life scared anymore. And I loved that passion for life. Like he mentioned how when it is his time to go, he's going to go out kicking and screaming. He's gonna be like, no,
Right.
just give me a little bit more time. And I just love that so much.
That's definitely
Especially
his personality.
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
you know, I do grief facilitating here in Elko, and it constantly is in the back of my mind that even if we, have death and tragedy happen to us or to someone that we love, like there's still so much life to live. And if I can give that to the people who attend grief group, man, that would just feel incredible. So I was so thankful for Caden for sharing that and just kind of giving me that perspective of like, yeah, like I want to use this life up. I want to
Right.
do
Yeah.
everything.
Seize the day, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Yep. Let's see. Okay. After that was actually my dad. I remember it was funny
He's
because
hilarious.
he's he's such an old dude. um and here's a side note. So we are pre-recording, right? Today my dad actually went in and he had to have a procedure done on his heart. And they were supposed to go through and put like a stent in.
Mm-hmm.
He's got some heart issues and stuff like that. They weren't able to do that. So I guess he's not eligible for open heart surgery. They just don't think that would be a good thing for him and his health right now. Um, so when my dad shared the story, and I was, thinking about this today about how we were going to recap his story, he shared two things that I am so glad that I have recorded. I'm probably going to get a little emotional. um, One, he shared his conversion story, and it is my favorite story that he's ever told. You know, Although he changed a little bit of the story to make it, more like listener friendly.
Uh-huh.
In the story, he talked about how he had an army buddy of his who wore two shirts. Well, yes, this guy did wear two shirts, but my dad always said he was wearing funny underwear because this was back in the 70s when tidy whities were the thing, And so you think about the old brand types of underwear versus what garments look like. There's a big difference, and that would have been
Uh-huh.
weird for people back then. And in the army, everybody changed in front of each other and showered in front of each other. And my dad was so bothered by this guy wearing these weird underwear that he went and he asked him multiple times, not just once, multiple times.
Right.
And it finally got to the point
Uh,
where he couldn't stand it. And he's like, dude, I gotta know. I gotta know, man. So finally this guy was like, okay, like he's not gonna pick on me. He just really wants to know about my underwear. Or like as my dad says in the episode, two shirts. Um, and that kind of started my dad on this path of like, where he kept thinking about the church. Now, he didn't get baptized for a while. He ended up getting transferred to a different base and kind of lost contact with this friend of his and stuff. And it wasn't until years later when he had some missionaries come up to the door and he scared them to death.
Right.
made them leap off the porch and everything like that, that he got back into, or he got into the church. Um, but then shortly after, he and my mom became inactive for a very long time. My entire childhood and a good part of my adulthood, they were inactive. And
Right.
and so he kind of shares that story, and he shares, how he came back to church and how he quit smoking after, gosh, he'd been smoking for like 50 or 60 years, like with the brief pause for him to get baptized. He quit smoking long enough to get baptized, and then when he got back on cigarettes, he kind of started getting inactive again. Um,
Wow.
but at the end of the episode, he shares a brief testimony. And I was just thinking about today, and I just thought, my dad, he is just that, sweet old man. um, but with his health problems, I know that mm, there's a chance that he could pass away at any time. I mean, maybe he lives for another 20 years, and that'd be amazing. But
Right.
there's always that risk with surgery. And I thought about it, and I thought, I'm so glad that I have this recording of my dad sharing my favorite story and his testimony. And that's something that not only I get to look back on for years to come, but something that my babies will get to look at. If technology is still as, techie as it is, maybe my
Yep.
grandbabies one day, it's just kind of neat to know that he left this little piece of himself. Um, and so I don't know. It was just got me. It just got me
Yeah.
today, and
It was a
I
good
loved it.
story. And
Mhm.
it's amazing that who knew that garments is you know why you're in the church basically, right?
Yeah.
It's just crazy how things work.
It really, really
So
is. Yeah.
awesome.
Well, take
So
us to our next guest, your family member.
yeah, so the next person we had on was Larry Johnson, which is my brother-in-law.
Mhm.
And this was a really cool story because he got emotional, and it's not something you necessarily want to admit. Where he had kind of a mental breakdown,
Yeah.
um, and it things got a little crazy for him and his family. A little concerning even. I mean, I remember him coming to my house. This wasn't in the podcast, but prior to kind of him breaking down, he came to my house um, to visit with him and his family, and you could tell something was wrong.
Mm.
And after he left, I told my wife, I'm like, I think I need to go meet with Larry. I need to go spend a day with him and see if I can help him. And
Mhm.
so I reached out to him, and I'm like, hey Larry, I'm going to come and hang out with you for a day. And so I went to his house,
Aw.
and I just spent the whole day with him and just let him unload.
Wow.
And I don't. Hopefully that helped him a little bit, but it was so when he actually shared the story on the podcast, I got to see kind of where he went from there, and the depths that he went to with this anxiety and this this mental breakdown that he had, and how he came
Right.
back out of it. And he's a really spiritual guy in general. So
Mhm.
um,
That story, I teared up quite a bit, and I remember, um, we had planned on doing it kinda interview style like we'd done all of our other episodes, but when
mhm,
Larry started talking, it was like I could just feel the spirit. I didn't wanna interrupt, and
right,
so that was our first episode where, we had a guest that kind of told their whole story, just about. I think it maybe was the whole story before we went into things, and that was really, it was really neat. It was a really neat experience to know that, like, we don't have to do things exactly the same for every episode, right? Like,
right,
this
yeah,
really is about our guest. It's about their story and how they need to share it. And, um, he had some really amazing, beautiful lessons that he sort of wrapped up for us in the end there. And it just gave me this greater appreciation for mental health in general, and for that the amount of support that I have in my life, and it was such an inspiring story, like seeing like how far he had come. So it was
Yeah.
awesome. He was a great
Well,
guest.
and just update. I mean, he's still doing really good.
Good.
Things are going really good for him, and yeah.
Awesome.
So
Very cool.
yeah.
Well, it's funny because with starting this podcast, sometimes we do have to, kind of volunteer our family that they need to be our guests, right? We're just like, hey, we need a guest. We don't have anyone this week, so you're doing it. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what happened with my little sister Sassy, which was so funny because I'm gonna ask you, can you say her name now? Because you struggled.
I know. I asked her like 10 times. Sashan? Sashan?
Yeah,
Sashan?
Sashan. Yep.
Sashan.
Sashan,
Okay.
but we call her Sassy Joe. I call her Sloppy Joe sometimes. But yes, she man, I was so proud of her. And it was kind of neat because, I told my story. I had John tell his story. My dad kind of shared his story. And then with my little sister, and they all kind of collided a little bit together. There were like bits and
Mm-hmm.
pieces of all these other things where you're like, oh, that's when that was happening. So it was
Right.
like, it kind of reminds me of, oh, what are those books? I can't remember. But there's these books where they're like series books, but you have like one set of characters first, and then you read about another character, and then it like ties back into like the first story. Anyway, it was really neat, and I was super proud of her, because she's not at that point yet where she's at the end of her story. She's kind of right in the middle of it,
Right. And yeah,
with
definitely.
her testimony and her attendance in church. And you know she shared a little bit about, she was in a rough marriage for a while and struggled a lot with infertility. Had for 10 years wanted to have a baby and couldn't. And shortly after she got divorced is, when the tragedy that I mentioned, uh, in my story, and again it was mentioned in John's story too, happened. And so I got to hear for the first time what that was like for her. And it was weird because I'd never even thought about asking her where she was at and what had happened to her. I don't know why. It was like, why didn't we talk
Mm.
about this? It was just very interesting to think like she didn't know how I received the news, and I didn't know how she received the news, and it's been 3 years. And so it was heartbreaking, kind of put me back in that spot of like, oh man, like made me feel bad that I wasn't closer to her and that we couldn't lean on each other. And, I don't even think I called her when it had happened. I think I was just so in this weird bubble that I just didn't even think about anybody else. Um, and then she had some really miraculously beautiful things happen, um, a year after this tragedy struck. All of a sudden she had this moment where she knew that she was receiving a message from the other side of the veil. And um and she ended up having a baby girl, you know and so she got that experience of being a mom when she wasn't even really trying, after she had done all the things to try and she gave up. She had this experience, and her really getting this, she has a kind of stepson, I guess, technically, right? They're not married yet or anything like that, but she's, in every sense of the word, his mom at this point. And
Mm.
so just her having that cohesive family and being with a good guy now, and um, it kind of put eternal families into perspective for her. And she is starting to go back to church. She's been going for a while now. She still has a little bit of partyness in her.
Yeah.
She's not doing everything perfectly. I love, she's got her tattoos, and, she'll wear her short skirts to church, and I love it because it's so true to Sassy. It's just like she's just like, I'm here. Like, I'm not going to be perfect like y'all right now, but I'm here. And
But
dang
yeah.
it, her message was, it doesn't matter if you're perfect or not. It doesn't even matter if you're not completely ready to live the gospel fully. just do something, just take it a little bit at a time. Like if you can't read your scriptures and say your prayers and you don't want to quit smoking or drinking or anything, just show up for church, just go, just do some service for someone, or have the missionaries over for dinner, or, just do something that keeps the gospel in your life. Because she has been able to find a lot more joy and happiness and hope since coming back to church. And
Baby
that was a good
steps.
one.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really cool story. And it was really neat to see those puzzle pieces, like you're saying, come together with your family. Because I mean, your mom and dad lived with you when you were in the ward.
Yeah, for a brief
But
time they did.
For a little while, right? But I never really got to know them on a personal level because, they just weren't around that often.
Yeah.
But to hear, your dad's story and your sister's story, and it was cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So our next guest was Marie Peterson.
Yes.
And the funniest thing was when she started her story and she grew up in a brothel in Elko,
she
Nevada.
Did. Do you know what's funny? I just found out where the brothels are last week. Like I actually drove by. There's 2 of them that I saw and I was like, oh, they're really real. I was like,
are they really still operational?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a whole, it's like, what? Okay. So anyway, I won't be giving out that information.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. I was like, oh, okay.
So she didn't actually grow up in a brothel. She grew up in a house that was a brothel, and then they renovated it. But anyway, that's a great way to start a conversation. Yes. Like I got worms in Dumb and Dumber, right?
Yeah.
So but yeah, so she told a story about how when her son Colton was young, he had some type of valve that actually destroyed one of his kidneys.
Yeah.
And he almost died. Like he went into cardiac arrest. He had kidney failure. They didn't know what was wrong. They had to fly him from Elko to Salt Lake in the worst storm in the that year.
Yep.
And how they had no money. And wow, I mean, just the thing I liked about her story is they were young and they had to really decide if they were going to like curse God and go away from the church, or if they're going to go all in and be faithful. And they chose to be faithful, and just all the blessings that have happened in their lives because of it. So inspiring. And I also love how the community, when they were young, the community kind of gathered around them and supported them. But now like their business has taken off, and now they kind of support the community.
They do.
And
it's a whole cycle of giving back. It's very cool. Yeah.
She's such a nice lady. I mean, I don't know her like you know her, because she's in your ward, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But just meeting her on the podcast was amazing.
Yeah. Her whole family is incredible, and they're just just good hearted, down to earth people. And they have worked very, very hard to have the type of success that they have now, but they don't let that put them in a I'm above you category. Like they're so giving and so kind, and just so they just know that like people can be down for so many different reasons, and they don't judge at all, and they just help where they can, and do so in a way that is not just necessarily like a handout. It's truly a hand up. They really do try to help other people, family members and people who are in their lives and stuff like that, to kind of elevate themselves, to get to a better position in life where they don't have to have as many worries as what comes with not being able to help yourself, and just really just cool. And she was so, I mean, she was so easy to listen to. I thought it was hilarious at one point, and I don't think that we left this in. I think we were able to cut it out. My fat cat jumped up on her. Do you remember that? Like in the middle of her episode, my big fat orange cat just She was sitting right here, just jumped on her, and she's like, "Oh, hello." He wanted to get on the action. It's kind of funny, I swear I keep thinking about. I'm like, we should do a bloopers reel
Oh
for all
yeah.
of our guests one day. We should start keeping some of our bloopers and putting them together because we may seem all put together, guys, but it's just the power of editing.
Right. Yeah. True
Oh,
that.
yep. Yep. Oh man. Well, another amazing person that we had on was Candace Stone. Candace is like I I love her so much. She is just so fun and so peppy, and she's a talker like me. We just talk and we talk and we talk. She had so many amazing things in her story. She struggled a lot with infertility, and her and her husband Shalem decided to look into adoption. She had some failed adoptions that really they were very, very hard. And then when she finally did adopt her boys, each of her boys had a heart condition,
Yeah.
and just to think, like you fought so hard for this child and now you have to deal with this too. It was really hard for Candace, and she went through some pretty dark times there. And um, what I loved most about Candace's story, and I do not want to share this because I don't want to take it away from anybody, but was the very similar experience that she had to my own in learning
Oh,
how
that's right.
to give something to the Lord. How do you actually use the atonement? Um, to this day, like whenever we talk about it, it's just crazy. I mean, it's like so similar, and it's not like a normal, it's not like oh, well, that's super normal to happen. It's like very, very particular. And when she was going to share the episode, when she was going to share her story, she had called me and she had just listened to the previous episode that we had recorded, and I shared my experience with learning how to use the atonement in that previous episode. And she called me and she was so angry. You shared the experience I was going to share. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I was going to share that. I'm like, oh my gosh. But instantly I felt very inspired to tell her, Candace, the scriptures always talk about how Heavenly Father will use 2 or 3 witnesses to confirm something to us. And so maybe this is just a second witness. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
That was
Y'all are,
cool. That was cool that you both had very similar
yeah,
experiences.
yeah. And to this
Yeah.
day, it is the most powerful part of my testimony when we talk about the atonement.
Hmm.
It's the thing that stands out to me the most. Like I always think about that over and over again. So it was good
Awesome.
stuff. Yep.
So our next guest was Jared Rader. He's just this nerdy dude. He loves history,
Yeah.
and I remember
Just so
making a
happy
comment.
too. He's just a happy guy, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember making a comment on the podcast. Oh, so that's where all the biographies go. You're the type of guy that buys biographies.
He nerds
So
out over church history and all of that stuff. And yeah, he's got a lot of good stories,
yeah,
lots
he
of good
kind of
stories.
focused on when he was young. He focused what got him interested was Orson Hyde because Orson Hyde grew up in
Mhm.
Nevada,
Yep.
and he drew the border. He actually drew the border between California and Nevada. That was cool. I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
pretty
I should
awesome.
have drawn it a little further in.
Yeah.
Just give Reno and Vegas to California. They're a different breed.
Right.
And I love my Vegas and my Reno friends, but you all know you're a different breed. Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, he was cool because he just had a lot of cool insight about church history and how how it related to like state history and American
Yeah.
history and how all those things kind of combine together to help grow his testimony.
Mhm.
It was a really cool podcast. It was different than than a lot of the other ones that we had done.
Yes. Yep. Very different.
But a lot of people watched that one, and so I think there was
Mm-hmm.
some definite interest in church history there. So
Yeah,
good.
I love, and I'm not going to spoil it. You guys are going to have to go listen to Jared Rader's episode, but he talked about a curse that was put on Nevada, which just made so much sense to me. So you guys go listen to that and see what he's talking about. I know in that episode he brought up polygamy, that being one of those topics when, when people talk about church history, sometimes there's some messy history, there's stuff that's just ugly and just shouldn't have been, and people have questions about that, and one of the topics that comes up often is polygamy. And oh, poor Scott. Sometimes I feel bad for embarrassing you, but most of the time I don't. And this was just one of those times where I was like, maybe I shouldn't have said that, because I shared my views on polygamy, which are not normal, modern day woman views. Like, I'm all for it. I'm like, go ahead.
Yeah.
Scott, you were just like,
Actually,
oh my gosh.
I think my wife would probably get on the polygamy bandwagon
I'm
if
telling
she didn't have
you.
to do like chores and stuff.
Yeah, if we could split it up. I used to always think that I would want a second wife to go to work, but I kind of would rather her stay home and clean the house. I'll go to work. I'll go make money. Things
Yeah.
have changed now. So
I think my wife would like to play video games, and she'll be the video game wife.
there you go.
And the reading wife. She likes reading too.
Yeah. I can get on board with reading. I'll do that.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, we had another great guest, L. Scott Jackman. And it was funny because I wasn't sure how to distinguish between the two of you. Like, what do we do when we have a Scott and Scott? Now, we've also had an Alicia and Alicia, which her episode
That's
will be
right.
airing soon. You guys haven't seen hers yet, but now we have two Alicias and we had two Scotts. So, woo, we got through that. But yeah, so he said, well, just call me L. Scott. So call him L. Scott. And his story was really neat for me to see, because he shared how he struggled since he was a youth with some really addictive tendencies, pornography and things like that, and just kind of how like he was able to kind of to tamper it down for a while. He went on a mission, he came home and he got married, and he thought, oh, I'm gonna get married and like never gonna have these problems again. But all of a sudden he realized they don't just disappear, and these addictions kind of put a really just a really hard wedge between him and his wife. And I loved that he really took responsibility, like he accepts that these are things that don't make him weird, right? He's normal for having those struggles, right? Like, we all have our thing. We all have our weaknesses. We all have our addictions. It doesn't make us weird just because our addiction's different than someone else's addiction, and we still have a Heavenly Father that loves us so much. But I loved in his episode when he talked about, it was a thing called betrayal trauma, that he had to recognize that his wife was traumatized in a sense from the things that he allowed himself to do, and just how he had to let her have her space to counsel and to grow and to be able to learn how to trust him again. And then it really, like, now he makes an effort to not just put the Lord daily in his life, but to make a concentrated effort to put his wife daily in his life. And I loved his vulnerability. I love his purpose. Since he's gone through all of these things, he really wants to be an inspiration, and he wants to be able to help other men in the gospel to become men of valor, right? So he started a Facebook group and everything. And he's doing a lot of work on himself so that he can stay close to the Lord. And one of my favorite things that he said was that he talks about sometimes he just makes the decision every day. Sometimes this decision is, well, today I'm not that person. Today I don't have that struggle. Today I don't want to do those things. But sometimes it's like for the next 5 minutes, I'm not that person.
Yeah.
Like for the next 5 minutes, for the next 30 seconds, I don't do those things. And he has to keep making those decisions so that he doesn't get himself in a position. And I love that he broke that down and he put it on a as needed scale, um, it was really neat. And, he was actually the first guest to reach out to us directly and ask us to be on the show. So
That's
that
a
was
big
super
deal.
exciting. It was super exciting. Yeah. And I didn't really personally know him. I know he was in a group with my mom. They had done this mindset mastery class. So I knew of him. Right. But like for him to reach out and to, ask, I was like, oh, yay. It's very exciting. So it was
Yeah.
a,
I love
yeah.
that he just had the courage to get on and talk about
Yeah.
pornography and
Yeah.
addiction. I mean, that takes some guts and some
Oh,
serious
yeah.
courage to do, right? Because this is public,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
This is video,
Mhm.
and but just to have the courage to do that is
Mhm.
amazing because that helps other people to know that they're not alone and that they can do hard things too,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yep. He definitely
So
inspired other men particularly to, take responsibility, but to also be brave and to be okay sharing your story and accepting that, like we're not all perfect yet. That's why we're still here, you know?
right,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
it's awesome.
very cool.
So the next guest has to be my favorite one. I do have a
Yeah.
favorite, Dusty Smith. So if you haven't watched this episode, this is probably the one that I would recommend the most,
Mhm.
especially for people that are struggling with their faith,
Yes.
because Dusty, he was he grew up not a member. He joined the church when he was a young adult, and then he left the church and he went against the church for 26 years, and
Mhm.
he like seriously against it to the point where he
Yeah.
like went to people that he baptized on his mission and apologized to them for
Yes.
teaching them the gospel. So
Mhm.
he would even go to other churches and preach against the church. Like it was intense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then he had a series of miracles happen that brought him back. And
Mhm.
now he does all of these firesides and all these amazing things for good. It's just it's incredible. It's an incredible story.
Yeah.
It was such a good podcast that I actually bought his book and I read his
Oh,
book because
nice.
I wanted to fill in the details, right, that we couldn't get on the podcast.
Right.
And man, what an amazing story. And it just shows you that when God wants something to happen in your life, he's going to make it happen. Even
Mhm.
if you make stupid mistakes and you do dumb things,
Oh,
God's
yeah.
going to just grab you and keep pushing you down the path cuz he's got a
Yep.
bigger plan for us than we think,
Yep.
and he can make things happen in our lives. So, I don't
Yep.
know, what do you think, Alicia?
Oh, man. Dusty, hey, he just had me smiling the whole time, crying the whole time. It was every emotion. I was just like this the whole time. One minute I'm just like, oh, and the next minute I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, oh. It was just
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, and he has a gift for storytelling too. And I
Mhm.
love that we have so many different types of guests. We have the ones that are maybe a little bit more nervous, the ones that are more shy, the ones who ramble on, the ones who don't like to say a lot and they just condense it down. You know, Dusty, this is what he does now. Like he has made it a point to just as much as he can to get out there and to tell his story because he feels like he went against the church for so long now he's got to really just like just dive in and be like, this is what I've learned. I was wrong. I shouldn't have
Yeah.
done those things. And man, he just wow. That's all I can say. It's just wow. It was incredible. I don't have a favorite. I have favorite things from each episode. But Dusty is one that like we need to go out to lunch with him sometime. And I
Mhm.
tried setting it up for when we're going to be at our book conference, but he's going to be back in Texas. He's a lawyer. And so he travels back and forth from Utah to Texas, and he is definitely someone who is officially on my bucket list to go sit down, to have lunch with, and just to be able to like get to know more about, because man, that guy has a powerful conversion story. Um,
Yeah.
and he's such an inspiration. It is, his story is so amazing that my favorite apostle, President Uchtdorf, the Sean Connery of the gospel.
Yeah, the silver fox.
Yes, the silver
That's what
fox.
we would call him.
Shared it in a conference. I was at the October 2016, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he said. I can't.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, he actually shared Dusty's story, which is just so. I mean, if that tells you how cool it is, go listen, and go listen again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the closest equivalent to a modern day Alma the Younger story that there can be.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's great.
Exactly. Oh man. It's kind of neat, Scott, because I feel like in doing these episodes, I have found so much inspiration from our guests. Like just hearing their stories and their experiences, listening to their testimonies and their takeaways. I I am truly inspired by every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guests that really inspired me a lot was Lisa Plum. She was our guest after Dusty. And she's actually writing a memoir right now that talks a lot about her experience. And I was so sad because we lost some of her audio. So we didn't get to share quite everything. I mean, we shared a lot, but we did lose some of her audio, thanks to technology. um,
Mm-hmm.
but man, just listening to her story, she grew up in a crazy bad sexually abusive environment. More than
Mm-hmm.
that, there was more that happened, and for a while there, she had this couple who would take her often, and they would take her to like nudist colonies, and they would take her to go get photographed, and I mean, just really evil stuff. And at one point, she talks about this encounter that she has with a child murderer, even, and it just gave me chills. And even at that young age, not being a member of the church, she had this moment where she heard the Spirit give her very clear instructions that, you know, led police back to where this child murderer was at. And just listening to how she took all of that, and she didn't just grow up and then join the church and then, get through all of her abuse. She did something with it, and she became a therapist who is now helping other people through their trauma and through all of
Mm-hmm.
their hardships and stuff. And it was, I have always had this passion, and I've always been like, "Oh, I would love to be a therapist." I don't have the dedication for it. Like maybe I will when my kids are gone out of the house. I don't know. But right now as a mom with 3 kids, I just don't have the dedication to put in the effort to become a therapist. But it's amazing to hear that she did, because she is really doing a lot of good, not just by sharing her story on our podcast or just by writing her book, but in her everyday life. She has made it a
Right.
point to take that ugly and to turn it into something that she can, help other people to create beauty from. And she was just so sweet, such a great guest. Kim actually recommended her. So I thought that was really cool, because that was one of our guests. You remember, let's see, Clarissa recommended Dusty. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's neat because there's so many different ways to become a guest on the show. Even if you don't reach out to us for your own story, if you know someone who has a good story, you can make us connect with that person, right? If you've heard a really great sacrament talk or fireside, or you have someone personally in your life who's a friend, just reach out to us and we'll reach out to them. They might have a harder time saying no to us than they would to you. Especially
It's
me. I'm
funny
pretty
though.
persuasive.
Yeah, it's funny how many people like you tell like they've watched an episode, or you even tell them that you're doing a podcast, like, oh, I've got this friend, you got to get them
Yeah.
on the podcast, right? They've got this
Mhm.
amazing story. So
Yep.
if you have a friend like that, shoot us, go onto Latter Day Lights and fill out the form and tell us, and let's get them on.
Yeah,
Like, let's get that story out there so we can inspire other people for sure.
definitely. Definitely.
So we're kind of getting
Yeah.
close to the end here. We got 2 more
Yep.
on our countdown.
Mm-hmm.
So Ethan Hawkeley was our next guest, and he was cool. I mean, he was kind of a, down to earth guy,
Very
pretty
chill.
easygoing.
Yep.
Yeah. But he shared some experiences that he had in the temple that were
Mm-hmm.
really cool. Really,
Yeah.
really cool experiences. Sacred to him, which is, props to him for being able to share something sacred to him. But
Yeah.
he's sharing it in the hopes that it can, you know, inspire and enlighten the lives of other people.
Yeah.
So, he took that leap, and he was willing to do that. Um, One of the stories that I really liked that he shared was he had a less active friend, well, completely inactive, really, when growing up.
Mm-hmm.
He called him Bobby Jones on the on the podcast, even though it was his name. But um, and he grew up in Boise, and then when he was going to school as an adult on the other side of the country, he went
Mm-hmm.
to the temple and he met Bobby Jones in
Yeah.
just on the other side of
Randomly.
the country.
Yep.
And he had, oh man, so that was just one of the cool that kind of showed that God, you know, God looks out for us. God puts people in our
Mm-hmm.
lives just to show us, hey, I'm here,
Right.
right? And
Yep.
there's no coincidences. And even though he might not have fellowshipped Bobby Jones when he was younger, like maybe he thought he should have, God still had a path for Bobby Jones, right?
Yeah,
He
he
still
did.
had a way for Bobby to get back to the church and get married in the temple. And then they
Yep.
met on the other side of the country.
Yep.
It's such a cool story. And then he's got 2 more stories that were even more
They just
amazing.
built on each other. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna leave those as cliffhangers, but
Yes.
it was a great podcast.
It really was. It definitely touched my heart, and it kind of brought back to me the memories that I've had of my own temple experiences and different sacred moments that I had in and because of the temple. And um,
Mm-hmm.
it was really neat because I had invited him to be on the show, and I had thought that he would maybe share something totally different. And I even told him, I was like, "Oh, I would like for you to maybe share about this." But then I was like, but you can share whatever you want. So like if you have something else that you want to share, go ahead and do it. And he really took that to heart, and he prayed about it. And he said, "I don't know why. I feel like I needed to share this instead." And I was like, "Okay, let's do it." Like I trust you. And that's one of the things that I love about this podcast, Scott, is that you and I don't have to know the stories. We don't have to,
Right.
we don't have to have all the details, and if some of like there's been plenty of times where our guests have kind of given us like a brief overview of a story, but then like we get on the show and they actually like, oh, they remember this part, or they add to that, or like, and it's, I mean, even though we might know a little bit of something that's going on, we don't really know the whole story until our guests are on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really neat because I really believe that the spirit guides our guests into sharing what it is that needs to be shared for whoever it is that needs to hear it. And to do so in such a way that is true to themselves, that's true to their story, their experience, their testimony, but that's also, true to the way that the person needs to hear it, right? Like we've said, we've had some, more interview like, we've had some that we don't interrupt them at all. We've had others who were just laughing, and then others were crying. And, I love in this situation with Ethan, he is very true to himself. He was just very, he's just like a very mature soul in a way,
Mm-hmm.
not like an old dude, but just like, just very, just very calm. Maybe that's what it is. He's just a very calm, mature soul. Um, but he's always smiling. And I just loved how he was willing to be like, you know what? I've got 3 stories and they're all about the temple. So it wasn't even like one cohesive progression of a story, this happened and then this and this and this. It was like this, this, and this, but they
Yep.
just all happen to be about the temple. So it was cool. It was a good episode.
Well, and remember how you had a similar experience with Candace,
Mm-hmm.
right? I had a
Yeah.
similar experience with Ethan in one of his
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. You still
And
got to tell me that story.
I know, I will.
You have to do that one day.
But yeah, so then our 19th
Yeah.
guest, right?
Yep.
Is
Our
Nick
most recent
Taylor.
one. Mm-hmm. Yep. Nick was a stubborn teenager who, did not take his bishop's counsel and did not adhere to the 31 flavors dating Barney advice, right? And he left the church for about 6 years. He kind of just stopped going and didn't really want anything to do with it and got into the college party life. And it wasn't until one of his childhood friends kind of put him in his place and laid it all out in the line for him that he was like, you know what? I need to take this more seriously. And now he is over the young men. He is a leader in young men's. He's an inspiration to them. I love that he is so he was so open about just how he was just a teenager. You know what I mean? It kind of gave me hope as a parent, right? Because when we watch our kids grow, we know our kids. And I think as parents, we kind of get those little inklings like, this one's going to be a little rebellious,
Right. This one's going to struggle.
This one's going to have a little bit of an issue sometime, and so what are we going to do in that situation? I always joke around, and I really don't want this to happen, so I should probably stop joking around. But I always joke around like my oldest, I think he'll be fine. Like I think he's just going to go off and he's just going to keep doing what's normal to him. I don't think he's going to be a crazy rebel or anything like that. My youngest, same thing. She's got a huge heart, a huge testimony. She loves church and socializing and all, so the worst that she's going to do is she's probably going to make out with some boys that she shouldn't make out with at some point. My middle child, I love my middle child so much. He is so giving and he's so service oriented. He is super brave. He's like the first one that'll get up and bear his testimony or give a lesson or whatever. But he is also the kid that is always looking for the fun. And it's probably going to land him in jail before he's an adult. And I'm going to have to bail him out for doing something that was really dumb, but was totally cool in his eyes. You know what I mean? Like that's just what I see sometimes. I'm like, oh, like gonna start putting away bail money for this kid. Oh, but Nick gave me hope that even if our kids start to stray, even if they kind of go off the deep end and try to find themselves in a very, unhealthy way, that there's hope. There's hope, and we can just love them. We can just be their parents and love them and encourage them to keep doing what they can to get back to the light, but to never give up the belief that Heavenly Father's got their back too, and he'll put whoever he needs to in their place to kind of draw them back, when the timing is right.
Yeah, definitely. God's got a plan for each one of us.
He does.
We don't know what that plan is. And sometimes he surprises us, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's a recap. Yeah.
That leads us to this episode, our 20th episode. I can't believe we've done 20 episodes.
I know. It's crazy because it's been almost a year since you made that phone call to me and were like, hey, I have an idea. You know what I mean? And it seems like, would it take us 8 months to get it started or something, or 6 months? How long? I don't know. It felt like forever. Like I felt like we were constantly in the prep stage, and now we're kind of in this like groove, we're like, okay, we're starting to see momentum build. I definitely feel like Heavenly Father has a plan for this show. I don't know if it'll ever get really big or anything like that, but I definitely believe that it is going to continue to touch hearts, to share light. Scott, let me ask you a question. I'm going to put you in the guest position here. So since we've started this show, since we've done all of these, episodes and stuff, what have you learned from it? Like, how has your testimony grown personally?
I think the biggest thing for me is just getting a broader perspective on the love that God has for each one of us. It's
Yeah.
been such a cool adventure just to get outside of my little circle, right?
Yeah.
Just my family and my friends, and just to see that there's, I don't know, like that God loves everyone, and that everyone has struggles, everyone has battles that they have to overcome, but everybody also has God on their side,
Yeah.
right? And you see
Yeah.
that. You see God coming through over and over and over again. A lot of times when you least expect it, or when they least expect it,
Yeah.
the people that we've had on the show, and just to see the love of God from a broader perspective in so many people's lives is just such an inspiration. And
Yeah.
it makes me happy. It makes me want to keep doing this, because if I can see that change in me from having that broader perspective, I'm sure it has that change on the people that are watching this. And that's the
Yeah.
purpose, just to spread that light, to help other people know that God loves them and that there's a plan and a purpose for them.
I love that. I kind of have to piggyback on that because I do think that it's amazing. I feel like there's so much power in sharing our story. So much power in sharing stories, and I guess to me it's almost kind of like sharing a little bit of your testimony, right? And
Hmm.
what you share will have a very big impact on the people who hear it, whether you share something good or bad, you know. It's gonna have a really, really big impact, and so I think it kinda goes back to that whole, uh, when in one of the episodes I mentioned how there's a scripture that talks something along the lines of, like, how our words have power and even our very thoughts have power. You know, our stories have power, right? I love that, there's a quote in the beginning of the Saints book, the first
Hmm.
book, book 1, and it talks about, I believe it's Brigham Young, and he mentions how we should be sharing our stories of how our testimonies have grown, and that's what the scriptures are all about. The scriptures are a
Hmm.
bunch of people who took their messes and made them into messages, who shared all of their tests and then talked about how those tests develop into testimonies. And I know those are really cliche little things to say, but it's so true, right? And if we're supposed to liken ourselves to the scriptures, are we not also supposed to be like those who are in the scriptures and follow their example and get out there and share the stories that helped our testimonies to develop and to grow and to strengthen and to get to that point of true conversion? There's so
Yeah.
much wicked and down depressing stuff out there. Um and I think this is one of those things. People often, they talk about awareness, right? Like, oh, well, we just need to be aware of this. And I'm like, it's great to be aware of it, but there should also be a purpose in it, right? Like, it's one thing to point out, hey, this is going on, but what's the takeaway? Like, I love that so many of these stories have these hard things. Like, we can have awareness for addictions and for infertility and for um, death and divorce and being lost and straying and kind of living in such a way that is not pleasing to our Heavenly Father. We can bring awareness to those things, but we don't want to
Right.
stay there. We want to move it forward. This gospel is a gospel of action. And part of that action is growing and developing our testimonies. And I love that you had this beautiful idea, Scott, to create this podcast. And I know that your heart has always been in the right place. It's always been, you just want to share light with the world. That's all. You just want to share light with the world. You just want to be, a defense against darkness. And I have seen so many times in my own life, in the short time that I've known you, um, where you've been that light for other people. And I love that you put action into that passion of yours, and you have created this platform where it can really put light into the lives of other people that don't get a chance to know you the way that I do. So I just want to say thank you for creating this and for inviting me to be on it, because it's my testimony has grown so much, and I've just developed this love for other people, um and for how very, very aware Heavenly Father is of each of us. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, Alicia. You know,
Mm.
and it truly, this is a platform. We built it to be a platform for the people watching and
Mhm.
for members of the church to share their story, to share their light, right?
Yep.
Um, and it's so cool that we have technology that allows us to be able to do that. So we need, in order for this to be successful, we need people to have the courage to share their stories.
Yeah,
So if you
absolutely.
have a story, like we said earlier, just tell us about it. Let's get you on. It's not scary. I mean, if you've watched any of these podcasts, you can see that, people are relaxed. It's a
Mhm.
very laid back environment. And you just get to share what you feel you need to share, based on what you're prompted to share by the Spirit. And so it's very low pressure,
Yeah.
but it makes a huge difference in the lives of others if you have the courage to do it. The other thing I wanted to say was, in order for us to really grow this, it's important that, um, when you have the opportunity, that you can share it. And one of the easiest ways to do that is with Facebook, right?
Yeah,
You can
definitely.
push one button. It takes 5 seconds to push a button, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden you just became a missionary, because now you just shared this spiritual message, uplifting message with, however many friends you have on Facebook, probably hundreds. And right, so if
Yeah.
every person did that, we could impact the lives of tens of thousands of people every single week. And you're doing
Mhm.
missionary work. It's like you went and knocked on 500 people's doors in 1 second,
There you
right? You just
go.
pushed a single button, and
Mhm.
you just did your missionary work, like years worth of missionary work in 1 second. I love
Yeah.
technology. I love that we can do that. So, the more that we can do that, just even having, if you don't have the courage to get on the show, have the courage to push a button,
Yeah.
because that could change someone's life. What if you push that button and somebody that you know or love watches that podcast, and that's the thing that puts them back on the path? Wouldn't that
Yeah.
be amazing? It's things
You know,
like that happen every day in our lives. But if you never push the button, if you never share it, then that will never happen.
yeah.
So,
It's so true, Scott. Right as you said that, I just thought of that scripture that talks about the worth of one soul, even just one
oh
soul. If you
yeah.
can bring one soul unto Christ, and guys, I'm not saying that our podcast is like the holy grail and it's just gonna make everyone great. It's not anything like that. But you don't know what seeds you're planting, and this just might be the seed that's planted, and then it's gonna take a lot of good relationships and friendships and experiences, and just kind of let Heavenly Father take the reins there, right? To water and to nurture that seed, but you never know. And it's so easy, like Scott said, it's so easy just to share it. You can pick a particular person, you can share it on one of your social medias. You don't even have to say anything. Like, you don't have to like describe, you can just share. That's it. Put a little
Hmm.
emoji on there if you have to. But it is
Right.
it is really easy. And we are definitely always still looking for guests, like we mentioned earlier. Whether you have a story to share or someone who has a great story, if you just reach out to us, you can go to latterdaylights.com and fill out a form there on our website, or you can reach out to us on social media. You can also email us at latterdaylights@gmail.com. Whichever way you need to do it, you can reach out to us, comment on an episode, comment, on YouTube, wherever, and we'll get back to you, because we definitely are always looking for new people to get on the show. And um, And the world needs your story. They need your testimony. So don't be afraid to take action.
I just want to say too, Alicia, thank you everyone that's watching.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
Just thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch these podcasts and to be part of this with us, right? Because we really feel that this is a group effort. This is for you, but it's also with you.
Yeah, definitely.
We're doing this together. Even though you're watching, you're still part of it. And so thank you so much for believing in us and for being part of this journey with us, going on this journey with us.
Right.
We wouldn't be able to do it without you. And we're so grateful that we get to do it with you. So if ever you feel prompted, go ahead and leave comments too, under the videos. And, just let us know that, hey, thanks for doing that, and encourage us, but also encourage other people, because by posting comments, maybe you can get other people to post, and it really becomes a thing that we can do together. So just thanks for being here, and thanks for being part of it. And we have some amazing podcasts we've already recorded that are coming.
Yes, we do.
And it's just getting better and better too. I mean, like you said earlier, Alicia, we feel like we're kind of hitting our stride. And people are starting to come out of the woodwork. We're getting more and more interest, and more people contacting us, and it's just gonna get better and better. So
definitely
keep watching. We got a lot more coming.
Definitely. All right. Well, that's all that we have for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for our 20th episode of Latter-day Lights. So exciting. This feels like a huge milestone for Scott and I. Definitely it's got us just smiling away and excited for what's to come in the future. If you guys need anything, reach out, let us know, give us some love, hit that share button, and we will see you guys next week.
That's right.
Have a good night, guys.
Everybody. See ya.
Bye.